And I'm just excited for the opportunities that young women have. And, it gets easier every generation. And once again, do we have improvements? Of course we do. The opportunities out there are very exciting, and watching young people grow and grow in their careers and helping them and mentoring them, that really fuels me as well.
You're listening to What Fuels You, where we deep dive with CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to learn more about their stories and uncover nuggets of wisdom we can all use. I'm your host, Shauna Swerland, CEO of Fuel Talent, an award-winning recruiting firm based in Seattle. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Dawn Lepore. Dawn is the former CEO and chairman of the board of Drugstore.com, a leading online retailer of health, beauty, and wellness products, which she led from 2004 until the successful sale to Walgreens in 2011. Prior to joining Drugstore.com, Dawn held leadership positions at the Charles Schwab Company, where she played a key role launching and then building Schwab's highly successful e-commerce business. Currently, Dawn serves on the boards of Loan Depot Inc., Servco Pacific, and SecureSave, and she is chairman of the board of Amperity. Dawn also serves as co-chairman of the Washington Teach for America board. Dawn has been honored by Fortune magazine 4 times as one of the 50 most powerful women in American business, and by the National Organization for Women at their Aiming High conference. Dawn graduated from Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts. Welcome, Dawn. I'm so happy to be doing this. You've literally been on my target list for I don't even know how long, and I'm so happy to be interviewing you officially.
That's very kind of you.
Well, your reputation is so strong, like nationally, but especially in the Seattle area. I'll never forget when I moved back from New York, and friends of mine were working at Drugstore.com. And I was so psyched to see that there was a female CEO and such a baller. And when I researched you for the podcast, I was like, I knew you were a baller, but it's next level.
Oh, you're very nice. You're very nice. I loved my time at Drugstore. I had an amazing team, Shauna, and I still stay in touch with my team, and they've gone on to do amazing things. And that's the thing I'm most proud of, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to hear more about it. Okay. But first, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire. You're not doing much chilling out and vacationing, but I am curious if you were, are you mountains or beach?
Oh, my favorite place to go is Dent Island. Do you know where that is? Way
Yes.
Desolation Sound. It's the one place I really relax. And I don't know why. There's something about the water and the pine trees and the nature, and you can see, just all sorts of nature. I just love it there. We haven't gone the last couple of years. We haven't been able to, but we usually go every summer, and it's amazing.
Yeah. I think there's like limited Wi-Fi access. Maybe that's why.
There is. That's why I like it so much. Nobody can find me there.
Yeah, exactly. That's so funny. Is there a hidden talent that you have that people will be
I was a
surprised
music
by?
major, and I played the piano and did a senior recital and stuff. It's funny. I never thought I'd earn a living. I wasn't good enough. I think the only person who thought I was good enough to earn a living from the piano was my mother, which is a wonderful characteristic in your mother. My father thought I would never get a job because I majored in music, and he said, "You're never going to get a job." And I think I did okay. So he was
Yes.
wrong.
Oh, yeah. Do you still play?
I haven't played in so many years. I want to pick it up again, but when I was a CEO of Drugstore, I had a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. So I had my children very late in life, in my 40s. Between running a company, having 2 little children, I just didn't have time, and I dropped it. And now, it's hard to pick up because you have to build up your muscles in your hands again. And it's a little frustrating. But there was one year for Christmas where my husband so sweetly found the old tapes of my senior recital in college and digitized them for me. And that was a very, very sweet gift. It was a wonderful gift.
I love that. Okay. Is there a character trait that you feel like all of your friends would describe as your best trait?
Oh, that's interesting. I would hope it would be empathy. I think that's something, I think I got more empathetic when I became a mom. Don't you think being a mother kind of gives you,
Yes.
I think you have to have a little more empathy when you become a parent. So
Absolutely. Well, especially because it's like anything that your children feel, you feel so deeply.
yes.
And then you recognize like how many different humans we interact with on a day-to-day basis, and to give those people grace
Yep.
and assume good in others, for sure. So I do remember you telling me that you were a pianist, and I'm curious, who's your favorite musical artist, or what, if you're going to go listen to music, what do you typically turn to?
Oh, in terms of listening to music, I have a pretty wide range. My husband and I just saw Paul Simon when he was in Seattle, and he's 83 years old. And part of the concert was just him and his guitar. I mean, it's just amazing.
So talented, just
Wow,
acoustic.
so talented. And then, I love Earth, Wind and Fire. I like the Four Top. It depends when you grow up what your favorite musicians are. But Simon and Garfunkel were a huge. Elton John. I've been to many, many Elton John concerts. I love those concerts. I love going to live music.
What is a common misconception about you?
One thing I think is a misperception, not quite the question you're answering, but, I don't have an MBA, and that's very unusual for somebody who's a CEO. And I do think it impacted me a bit. And it's interesting because I used to speak a lot to MBA classes, both at UW, down at Stanford, yet I didn't have an MBA. I wanted to. And when I was at Schwab coming up in my career, I talked to my bosses about taking time off to go to an MBA. And I didn't know it, but at that time, my boss, who was head of technology, was about to retire, and they were going to name me to his position. I didn't know that. And so they said, no, you have too much momentum on your career. Now's not the time. So I feel like I got an MBA kind of through experience, but it is something that I kind of wish I had, given the circles of business that I operated in.
It's interesting. Maybe it's just, I guess maybe it is true that a lot of people have MBAs. I don't know if it's in the startup world that there's as many
I
as
don't
in the
think it's in the
larger
startup world at all.
Yeah.
And,
in like the Fortune 500 probably, but I
Yeah.
don't really see it as much in the startup community.
I think you're right. Startup, it's about innovation. And, I love the startup world. One thing people may not know about me is I am fascinated by entrepreneurs. Chuck Schwab was he's still alive, amazing entrepreneur. And that was where my forwardable career was. I was there for 21 years. And I still remember early in my career, went to a meeting with Chuck. I was very low level. And the meeting went really badly. I mean, really badly. Chuck got really upset with me. And the person I reported to at the time, and that was the age of voicemail, I'm dating myself, but left me a voicemail and said, I heard you hit a helicopter blade in your meeting with Chuck. And he said, you don't understand entrepreneurs. And I want you to go home this weekend and read this book about entrepreneurs. And I don't remember the book. So many people ask me, what was the book? I don't remember, but he gave it to me. I went home that weekend. I read about it. And it said things like they're nonlinear thinkers. They don't tell them they have to make a choice between A and B, and, just lots of, and so I was obviously much more effective at working with Chuck after that. And I just love the nonlinear thinking, the risk taking, seeing things people don't see and other people don't see in white space. So I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over my career, and I'm just fascinated by them.
Yeah. It's funny because my son Max is now on the East Coast, and he's in this, prestigious school where everyone's telling him you got to go consulting or investment banking. And those are the two areas. And most of his friends are from the East Coast, whose parents and families are all kind of, working in large financial services firms. And he grew up around all entrepreneurs. Like my brother's an entrepreneur, my parents are entrepreneurs, all of our family friends are entrepreneurs. I think it's like a Seattle thing, every different industry. And I didn't even recognize it until he's like, I don't know anybody that's got like a boss.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah. And, my daughter is working for a startup now, an AI startup. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe she's gotten the bug as well. I don't know.
How cool is that? So if there's a book that was written about your life, what would you think it would be called, or what would you want it to be called?
Oh God, I don't think I don't like attention on myself. So I can't imagine somebody writing a book about me. I guess the one thing is I think that people have underestimated me through most of my career. And so maybe something about that.
Yeah. I want to hear about, we'll get into it later, but I think that's an interesting thing. Do you think it's because, we talked about like not really getting into the whole woman thing, but do you think it's because of being a woman, or because of something about your demeanor? Because you are one who like deflects off of you onto others. And sometimes people who, it's like, you're not trying to flex. Somehow I feel like you're very humble.
Well, I worked for somebody, a guy named Dave Patrick, who was a wonderful
I
mentor.
remember Dave. He worked out at the same gym as me in San Francisco.
That's right. And Dave at Schwab, Dave is still larger than life, and was always larger than life. He came in, he owned a room, and he was an amazing mentor. I have to say, I really, really was lucky. I worked for him for about 21 years. I love being around those people, but that's not me. And it was interesting when I was CEO of Drugstore, because of my name, Dawn, and if you don't No, it can sound like Don, the male name
Yeah,
versus female.
DON. Yeah.
And we would come into meetings, and if I had some of my direct reports who were male, and we would go into a meeting with somebody who would come to see us that didn't know us, they would automatically assume one of the men was the
Oh,
CEO.
of course. You're like the executive assistant.
Right. And my team would get a kick out of it. But honestly, I don't want to embarrass people. Like, why would you do something that would embarrass somebody on purpose? So I started walking in, introducing myself and handing my business card so they would know I was the CEO. But I do think there's some people that walk in and really own a room. That doesn't mean that I don't think I have executive presence. I certainly think I do. But it's just very, I'm not Dave Patrick. I mean, I admire people like that, but that's not me.
That makes sense. Are you a late to bed or early to rise person?
I used to be early to bed. I've gotten more late to bed as I've gotten older. And part of it is I'm so busy that for me to read or just have time to do things or, things that I enjoy, I end up staying up sometimes later than I should.
Yeah.
But this, when you're working hard, when you have an operating job, especially, and children, you got to get sleep where you can because it's hard to come by sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and all the messages as I'm getting older and the messages are constant, okay, get protein, get sleep.
Get protein, get sleep.
Like a high weight, whatever. I'm lifting heavy weights, but the sleep thing keeps coming up. And I love sleep, but I also have this need to accomplish a lot and ingest a lot of information. So I'm the same as you. I just want to read or watch TV or do something. Yeah.
And plus now, look how fast things are moving. It's even faster than when I was younger. So it's like drinking from a hot fire hose every day. And so just trying to catch up on little snippets of things. I have to do that.
What are you reading these days or listening to or watching?
I read a lot. I do books on tape. I like to listen to books.
Me too.
I take in information that way much better than reading it. But I've read all of the books about entrepreneurs. Once again, the books about the founding of, Google and Uber and, Instagram and all those books and the, Bad Blood about the Theranos.
That's so funny. We love the same stuff, but I end up watching the TV shows like the Made for TV. I love that stuff, like the Uber story with good.
And these books are super. Once again, it's just interesting. First of all, we've watched those companies get founded and grow, so to see the inside story. And there are some very good journalists who write some of those books. So I think those have been very interesting. Also, this is something people may not know. I am such a Harry Potter fan. I love the books. I love the movies. In fact, the funny thing is my children, they know all the lines from the movie. And my daughter kids me that I'm not sure what this says about your parenting skills, Mom, that I know every line in every Harry Potter.
You were like, I was busy. What can I say? That's hilarious. I've never seen anything Harry Potter.
Oh my God, you're missing so much.
I need to. It's just not in my head, it's not my jam, but maybe it is.
I love the books. I love the movies.
Yeah.
So we joke about that.
Funny.
My family always gives me Harry Potter little gifts, for Chris, little joke gifts.
I love it. Okay, well now I know what to get you. I wouldn't even know where to begin, but I will research it. So your childhood was probably different than your own children's. I'd love to hear more about it. I know you're from the East Coast, right?
Yeah, my parents are Canadian. So I grew up in I was born in the US. My brother was born in Canada. My sister was born in the US. I'm the middle of three. But it was interesting from a political standpoint. I grew up with parents who didn't vote. So we never talked about politics around and I'm not super political, but it's just interesting as I got older, especially got into business, you kind of have to care about politics, also just being a citizen. So I had to educate myself about that. We were middle class, but the one thing is my parents felt education was incredibly important. And so I was the beneficiary of that. Grew up on the East Coast, but born in San Francisco, grew up on the East Coast. Started out at University of Virginia for a year and a half, wasn't very happy, and transferred to Smith because one of my professors at UVA was from Smith and recommended it. And a women's college is not the right thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for me at that time, it was the right thing. It's interesting. I was just in Dallas at a meeting and I had lunch with one of my friends from Smith, and she was saying the same thing. She majored in chemistry and went on to have a great career. And she said, I never would have majored in chemistry had I not gone to a women's college. And I think things are very different now. Keep in mind, I'm older. We went to college. We were in the college in the late 70s. And so being in a women's college was very helpful for me.
Was it super hippy dippy back? My son's at Amherst. So I've been in Northampton.
Yeah.
So I love Smith. It's beautiful, but very hippy dippy.
Yeah. Now it's very, very hippy dippy. it wasn't as much. And I
Yeah.
was in the music department, which was kind of a small department, a very good department for a small liberal arts school.
It's a great school. I mean, super academic, like
Yeah, yeah.
very prestigious.
I'm
Yeah,
not sure I
that's
could get in
amazing.
now. Don't you feel that so many people
Oh,
say
yeah.
that?
I almost went to USC. I'm like, there's no way I would have gotten into USC.
I know.
Absolutely no way.
It's so much harder
Um,
now for our kids than it was for us. That's for sure.
yeah, so much harder. I mean, UVA, people love UVA. What was it about? Why didn't you like it?
I was like the third class that had women in it. I mean, it was all male, and I think I was the second or third class. So it was a lot of guys. It was very, I was in a special program there, like, for top students. And so we had our own dorms and we had our own advisors and stuff. So that was nice, but there's a lot of partying that went on there. And I was very young when I went to college, very naive, very
You
young.
felt a little overwhelmed when you were there.
And I think Smith
Yeah.
I was overwhelmed. And I think Smith was a more nurturing
Well, and
environment,
smaller.
which is what I
Yeah.
needed. A smaller place.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you said your
Yes.
parents
Yeah.
valued education, valued academics. Like, how did that show up? Were they like the outcomes of it, or more like, hey, no TV in the house, or we want you to push to take the hardest classes?
A little bit of all of the above. I mean, my mom went to college while from about when I was about, I don't know, 10 to 14. Like she didn't have a college degree and desperately wanted to go back, and she went back to college, which I look back now, she had 3 children and she did a full load of college and we never noticed the difference. So I think about, my mom was an amazing woman. She's passed away now, but she was quite amazing, a wonderful role model for me. But it was all about, I still remember one time when I was young, I came home with a B plus and my father just about flipped out. So they were pretty
Yeah.
focused on my grades. And it was just kind of expected in the household. It was just like you went to school, you did your homework. I had an easy time with school. One of my children has a real profound learning difference, and that's been an experience for me to really understand kind of a neurodiverse, child that school is
Yeah.
it's harder
Well,
for
and given
than
that
it
you
was for
love
me. So that's been a real
entrepreneurs, you
great
probably
experience.
see how many entrepreneurs also have challenges in school, but they're so
Yes.
wicked smart at outcomes in business. But
Yeah.
that's why some of these
Yeah.
schools just need to learn how to
And
teach differently to
yep.
different ways of learning.
Completely agree. And one of the reasons, as I mentioned, I'm the chairman of co-chair. I have a co-chair of the Teach for America in Washington. And one of the reasons I got involved in education is just watching, first of all, the difference a good teacher can make. Just makes a huge difference, especially for kids who are struggling in some way in their lives. And I've heard so many inspirational stories about that. But just watching my son, and it was my son who has a learning difference, go through things and feeling like we had so many resources for him. Obviously, we could get tutors, we could do all the things. And just thinking about all the non-affluent kids who didn't have that kind of support and how hard their lives were. And it made me really want to give back, especially in education. And the more I learn about low income students in the state of Washington, 11% of the very low income students in Washington read at grade level. And just think about, we talk about AI and how that's going to change jobs, and it will, but just think about somebody trying to get out of poverty who can't really read at grade level. It's just, I really feel like
We
we're
are.
failing our
If there's
low
people that
income
are
students.
listening, Dawn, that are like moved by that, which I'm sure everyone listening is, just saying it again, 11% can read.
11% of low income students in Washington state read at grade level. And there's particular points that are very important. 3rd grade reading, 8th grade math. If students don't take algebra in 8th grade, then they cannot go into STEM careers because they can't catch up on the math. And so statewide, it's somewhere around 30%, but we're not doing that read at grade level. But for low income, that's the average of all students. For low income students, it's much lower. And I do feel that you're failing our kids. And what's interesting about Washington, a very high percentage of students in Washington go to private schools. And we're lucky we have so many great private schools that honestly, my children went to private schools. But 30%, which is a pretty high percentage. And so what I find is I go around talking, especially in the tech community, which obviously is affluent, people don't understand what's going on in the public schools. And it's not that they don't care, they're caring people, they're philanthropic, but they don't really understand what's happening with public education and what's happening. And I'm not saying there aren't some wonderful teachers in our public schools. Of course there are. And it's a very complex problem. But we are failing our low income children. And one of the things I don't understand, it should be a bipartisan issue. I feel like there should be a national
I
emergency
agree.
about this because across the country, if you look at our report cards, they're just not very good. And I heard a guy named John King, who was the Secretary of Education under Obama, speak. He's just wrote a great book. I think it's called Teacher to Teacher. And he talks about his mother died when he was very young, and that there was a teacher who made a huge difference in his life, like just transformational difference in his life. And he's written this book. And what he said really resonated with me. He said, we need to want for other people's children what we want for
Absolutely.
our own. So, I mean, I wanted a great education for my children, all the people I met, I'm sure you do as well. But we need to not forget about
Mhm.
other people's children who
What
aren't
can people
having a great
do?
education and what
Like
that
if they're
means in their
listening and they're like,
lives.
how do I get involved? Is there a way to volunteer and read with kids?
There's lots of ways to get involved. So, contact me if you want to publish my contact info, that's great. We doing events. We're having an event actually next week where we're bringing in some of they're called core members. Those are I don't know, for people who don't know what Teach for America is, it was started by Wendy Kopp, who, by the way, I've admired for 20 years, and I just got to meet her for the first time. She's one of my idols. I got to meet her. She's truly amazing. And she had this idea when she was at Princeton of getting kids right out of college to dedicate 2 years and training them how to be teachers and putting them in low income classrooms and celebrating 35 years next year. So it's been around for a long time. There are other organizations, but this is the most successful one. And it's really a talent magnet. And one of the things, for instance, a lot of the teachers who come into the Teach for America program are diverse. And for Black and brown kids to have a teacher that looks like them makes a big difference. And I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but in the state of Washington, a small percentage of teachers are of color, that yet our Teach for America teachers, I think they're almost half of color. So we're able to get very talented young people of color into the classroom, teaching these low income kids. There's been lots of studies about having a Teach for America teacher or a Teach for America alum is equivalent to having extra months of
Wow.
school every year, that because the quality of the teaching is good. About 75% of people that go in the program stay in either teaching or education or service or nonprofit of some sort. So many of them, I'm on the board of a nonprofit called the Modern Classroom Project, which was founded by a TFA alum. And he was going to be an investment banker. And he's amazing. He's an amazing CEO, but he got the bug for helping kids. He was teaching in Washington in a high school in one of the low income areas. So many of these people just get this passion about helping these kids, and they go on to they're so inspirational, Sean. I am in awe of them. I
find it so inspiring. I mean, when you were young, did you ever imagine maybe becoming a teacher, or what did you imagine for your own future when you were like high school?
I didn't know what the fact is, I often say, if you went back to Smith into my graduating class and asked who's the most likely to be a CEO, maybe there were 600 people in my graduating class.
That's
I think I'd be number
hilarious.
590.
I have that.
I mean,
that's so funny. I put that in one of my questions. I was like, I'm always curious. Like, okay, I'm kind of the same. Like, I've had a lot of the same friends my whole life, and they'd be like, "Oh, Shauna at this stage is the Shauna that I knew in like 5th grade." And very extroverted and kind of, same. Some people completely change, but I did ask that. I'm like, if we went back and asked I didn't say Smith, I said like your middle school friends, would they think like, okay,
Yeah.
Dawn is going to be the one to be a 4-time Fortune most powerful woman in business? No.
Oh my God, no, absolutely not. And I mean, not. And in fact, I didn't. I mean, I remember being at Schwab and having the gentleman who came in to run technology, and I watched him come into the organization. And I was just interested, like, what did he do first? And how did he meet people? And how did he present and I just loved to learn. I mean, a lot of it is I just learned from a lot of people around me. And he was a wonderful mentor as well. And when I was promoted into the CIO job, so heading technology, and Schwab was very visible back then. We were very innovative. We were the first ones to do internet trading, and that there was no AWS. Like, we had to kind of build this all ourselves, and it was growing like crazy. It was one of the most stressful, but most fun times of my career. I think we increased our infrastructure 1,000% a year. We were growing
That's
like 10% a
crazy.
day. I mean, it was just amazing how the trades were. But I would have access to a lot of the CEOs at technology companies. I was very lucky. So John Chambers and Scott McNeely and Steve Ballmer and all these different, actually, Steve Jobs actually called on me when I was in that job. I would tell them, you have an hour. So the first half hour, you can sell to me, whatever your product is, but the second half hour is my agenda. And I would ask them, like, how did you found the company? What's your culture like? what is your leadership team? How do you lead? And they were they were mentors. They didn't know they were mentors. Mark Leslie was another one. And they kind of humored me. They're very nice in terms of answering those questions. So I felt like I got a little mini MBA on the job.
So it sounds like from listening to you that the first time you kind of started to feel like I got this and I feel like I could do this and be a leader was at Schwab. It wasn't until that job.
It was at Schwab. Of course, I was there for 21 years.
How did you get the job?
I started at a very low level. My husband.
Oh, tell me everything. Wait, you weren't married. You were married that young? I
was married. We've been married now 41 years. So we've been married quite a while. But we were together, and the man who was running technology, a guy named Woody Hobbs, who was running technology at Schwab, was somebody that my husband knew, and he was doing some consulting there. And they said, do you know anybody that you could recommend for this manager position? And he recommended me, and I got the job. And one of the stories that's quite interesting is we were both in the technology organization. I didn't want to work for the same company. So I took the job and said to him, now you're not going to take a permanent job there, right? You're just consulting. And he said, no, I'll never take a permanent job there. So I took the job, and then like a month later, they offered him the job and he took it. And I was really pissed. I didn't want to work for the same company. But anyway, as we moved up, and he was very technical, he really didn't really want to manage people. He was just he's a systems programmer, kind of very into the bits and bytes. And at one point they came to me and said, we would like to promote you, but we can't because your husband can't, especially a financial services company.
Yeah, the whole Chinese wall. Yeah.
That's not. And so they said, as long as he's here, you can't go any farther. And it was an interesting conversation I had with my husband. So how was your day? Well, honey, I had this conversation, but my husband's remarkable. And he said, I'm holding you back. I'm going to go get another job. And he did.
Yeah. So you're we're talking the 80s, crazy time to be in finance, but extra crazy time to be in finance as a woman.
Yes. Yeah. Schwab was great, though. I have to say, we were West Coast, and Chuck was a true entrepreneur. He just wanted talent. We had a large gay community at Schwab. In fact, the AIDS crisis hit us very hard at Schwab, and very proud of the human resources policies that we had to support people going through that terrible time. It was different. I would not have been in the same position on the East Coast. It was much more traditional there, but Schwab was San Francisco, and we were the scrappy ones, and we were trying to fight with the big guys. And, Chuck just cared that you worked hard and you got results. And that's really
we were there at the exact same time. It's so crazy. Oh yeah. We overlapped.
And were we?
And it was the best. It was
a great time to live there.
I loved it. Yeah.
Wonderful
so you
city.
Helped launch so much of the business. The online trading was a big one,
especially,
big time. But I feel like back then, how did you even get people to trust the process, trust the internet with their money, with their...
It was interesting. Some of this, obviously we had a great brand. Chuck was a wonderful brand. The company was based on no conflict of interest, and our values were very, very strong. And I think there was a huge trust in the brand and a huge trust in Chuck. But I still remember going to a conference. It was a CIO conference about then. And I was just ridiculed and told that I was putting my company at risk, my customers' money at risk. How could I possibly do this? And I was fascinated by the internet when it first came out. Did I envision what was going to happen? Absolutely not. Could I have envisioned, at that point, there was just like could make hotel reservations and do online trades, and that's about it. And you could do email. But I was fascinated by the transformation. And that's something I've always really been interested in, is transformation. And I was very lucky to be at Schwab. I had huge opportunities, wonderful mentors. And I never pictured myself as a CEO. In fact, I have to give Howard Schultz a lot. Well, Meg Whitman and Howard Schultz. I was on the eBay board, and Meg Whitman, who's just a phenomenal person, a phenomenal CEO. I just admire her so much. She was a wonderful mentor. And Howard Schultz was on the board as well, who was just obviously amazing. And we were on vacation in Hawaii. It was right after we had our second child, our daughter. And I still remember running into Howard, and I didn't know he was on vacation there. Of course, Howard looked like he just came off the cover of GQ. And, I had an infant and a 4-year-old. So I wasn't.
You always look amazing. Yes.
Well, you remember that when you have a newborn, you're
Barely keeping it
exhausted, et
together.
cetera.
Yes.
But at any rate, I ran into Howard and he said, "Oh, why don't my wife and I take you and your husband out to dinner?" And so we had dinner. And during dinner, Howard looked at me and said, "Don, you should be a CEO." And I said, "Howard, are you kidding? I'm not ready to be a CEO. Nobody's going to hire me as a CEO. Absolutely not." And he said, "No, Don, you don't see it yourself, but you're ready to be a CEO." And I give Howard so much credit for being, Melinda used to talk about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor. He was an amazing sponsor. And he said, "I'm going to do a few introductions because I really think you're ready. You don't know you're ready." And I was so lucky. He was one of 3 or 4 people in my career who really believed in me before I believed in myself.
How did he know you? Besides because the eBay board? But had he ever worked with, I mean, I guess you are seeing somebody in that type of role.
Oh, absolutely. And eBay, there, was growing fast. There were lots of issues. I mean, not issues because the company was run badly, just you're growing so fast.
Yeah,
It's a
just
new area. And it was
the
a wonderful
scaling.
board. So I got
Yeah.
to know Howard pretty well. And we were on there for years together. So that's how I got to know him. And he was part of Mavron. Mavron was an early investor in drugstores. So there was kind of a connection there. So I ended up getting the drugstore job. But
Oh, that's incredible.
one of the best gifts I think you can give to anybody you run into in your career is to believe in them and help them believe in themselves. Because I'm sure you've met many people. I've met so many people, men and women, who don't realize how good they are. They don't realize how talented they are. Maybe they don't have the confidence, or they just don't realize how much potential they have. And one of the things I most loved about my career was being able to work with really smart people and help them realize their own potential. Don't you think that's a great gift you can give somebody?
The best, the all-time best. And it's the thing
Absolutely.
that just gets your juices. It really fills your bucket. Like it fills everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. But, when I was reading and saying, you did really tech, you were really in operations, legal, every area, strategy, but everybody has kind of their sweet spot. They'll say like, "Oh, he's a technical founder," or "He's a sales guy." Like, what's your kind of thing? Are you just like a great operator or great what's your thing?
That's a good question. So I'm not deeply technical, and I always had great technical people working for me. I think not that I haven't made lots of hiring mistakes in my career, because I have, but I think I'm a good recruiter. And I think one of the things that has been a reason for my success, one is I'm good at synthesizing things across a lot of different topics or things. And you do that a lot as a board member. But I also think I never thought I was the smartest person in the room. And I think as a CEO, one of the best things you can do is make sure you're listening to your people. You hire great people, you give them input, you give them influence, you listen to them. And I was never the smartest person in the room. I needed smart people around me. And I think that that's something that I did. If I look back at my career, I think that's something I did well. Hire really smart people and listen to them, let them have input, let them help shape the strategy. And I care a lot about operations. I'm good at thinking about operations. I mean, when you're running technology or you're running a big organization, obviously it's a lot about putting the right people in the right jobs, paying attention to the metrics, knowing how things are going. I mean, you have to be detailed sometimes and high level other times. I mean, all of those things are important. But I think at the end of the day, it's bringing smart people around you and then working with them and valuing what they bring to the table.
Yeah, I completely agree. So, but you rose up to vice chairman. And at what stage was Howard kind of saying, "I think you're ready to be a CEO"? Because being vice chairman is a pretty big deal. Like, why would you leave that kind of role?
I took the drugstore job in 2004. And so I don't remember exactly when I became a vice chairman. It was sometime, I think, right after my son was born. So my first child was born in 98. My second child was born in 2002. So, and when I moved up here, my children were 2 and 6. When I moved to Seattle to take the drugstore job, they were 2 and 6. So it was about that time. And Schwab was going through a change. Dave had left. Chuck was taking over. And it was just, I was ready. I mean, at some point, you're just ready to do something else.
21 years is giving a lot of your time and ready for a new challenge.
And I think you can get stale if you stay at one place for way too long. And you need to learn from other people. You need to learn from other industries. You learn a lot from going into new environments. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so how was it as a family to make that type of decision to move to Seattle?
My husband was a Californian through and through. We just kind of bought our forever house and renovated it. And it was really funny because I said to him, "I'm just going to go on the interview. I don't think I'm going to take the job, but I need the experience to go on the interview." So I came up there and I loved everybody I met and I had a great time and it was wonderful. And I was sitting in the Seattle airport on my way back to San Francisco thinking, how am I going to tell my husband that I really want to do this? And I came home and told him, and he said, and by the way, my husband retired when we had children. I'm very lucky. When we had our first child, he took a paternity leave and then decided to stay home. And so a lot of that has allowed me to do what I've done. And it was a time when there were very few men at home. In fact, one of his greatest memories is he was featured in an article on trophy husbands. I forget, it was in Fortune or something
That's
at the time.
awesome.
But at any rate, he said there's two rules. We all go or nobody goes, like none of this commuting up to Seattle business with two little children. And we keep our house in California. So we kept it for too long, actually. But that was one of the deals. And then we moved to Seattle. He said it'll be a family adventure. And it was. It definitely was.
And
We
what's
love
kept
Seattle.
you
We
here?
still-
I mean, now you're here. It's been a long time.
Yes, 20 years we've been here. And we love it. And our kids love it. This is home for them. I mean, they were young when they moved up, and this is home for them, definitely.
Yeah. So you're running drugstore.com, obviously booming company. Husband moves up here, small kids, and you find out that you've got cancer. How was that? And what
tough.
was your response as far as we talked a little bit before recording about like, what is your responsibility to the company to share that?
That was interesting because also the interesting thing is I know nobody believes me when I say this. I had a premonition. I was sitting in my office late one night. I'd had my children older. They were young. I thought, I'm so stressed. I'm working so hard. I need to make sure that I take care of my health so I can be around for them for a very long time. And I thought, I don't know how I'm doing. I can't describe it. I didn't have any symptoms. Maybe it was just anxiety or whatever it was. So I ended up asking to have some tests, and they found cancer. And it was really interesting. And the doctor who found it, it was kind of obscure. It was cancer of the appendix, which is very obscure. And so very hard to find. And, when I'm a public company CEO and I had to go to my board and say, by the way, I've just been diagnosed with cancer. And I still remember I was down in San Francisco and I was relatively new. I mean, I don't remember the exact year. I think it was 2005 though. So I'd only been in the job a year, and I was down in San Francisco meeting with investors with my CFO, and they'd found the cancer, but I had to have a blood test to tell whether, kind of what was going on. And I hadn't had the results. And all day I was waiting for the lab to call to tell me the results while I'm doing these meetings. And I was too new. I couldn't really tell my CFO what was going on. I mean, that was a tough day. I still remember that day. That was tough. But anyway, I told my board, they were wonderful. I had a wonderful board, and we had a long discussion about when do we disclose. Obviously, we're a public company, and they didn't know they didn't know if it had spread. I mean, I had to have surgery, and we all decided, let's get the surgery first and then see where things are. And if it's spread and you have to have chemo, of course, we're going to have to announce it. And, the company had been without a CEO. That the previous CEO had left. They'd been without a CEO for a while. I had come in. There'd been a lot of instability. So that's the other thing. You have to think about the culture and the employees. And in the end, they found it so early. It had not spread. I was very lucky. I didn't have to have chemo. I didn't have to have anything after the surgery. So we did not end up disclosing it because we didn't feel like we needed to. It really didn't impact and other than going out for the surgery, there was really no impact on my ability to do my job. So because, it was so early.
Yeah.
The hard thing was
goodness.
a couple of years later, and I do still remember this because my husband never called me at work ever. I mean, it was just like, he knew I was busy. We would deal with the stuff with the kids at the beginning of the day, end of the day. And my assistant came in and said, your husband's on the phone and he has to talk to you. And I picked up the phone and he said, honey, I'm at the doctor. They found, over 100 lesions in me. I have cancer. And that was really hard. And, I'm very lucky he's still alive. He's in remission, still fighting the cancer, but in remission. But he has multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, which turns out to be one of the best places you can live for a blood cancer is in Seattle.
Absolutely.
But he had to go through a bone marrow transplant. And at that time, the prognosis was very, very poor. And it was also before Obamacare. So remember, all of our income, all of our health insurance came through my job. We were uninsurable, both of us, because with cancer, you would not be able to get other insurance. And I remember saying to him, do you want me to quit? I mean, do you want me to quit my job? And he said very clearly, absolutely not. This is what you do. And he said, if you quit, the cancer will have won, and I will not let the cancer win.
I have chills. Oh my gosh.
So, and he fought, and I was thinking, how am I possibly going to bring up two children by myself? I mean, I know that sounds selfish, but you just go to that place of, oh my gosh.
Of course you do.
How is this going to work? But, the bone marrow transplant was very difficult. It was very hard. We had a very hard year, as you can imagine, but we got through it. And people ask me how I got through that time. And this, Shauna, when you have a crisis, you put one foot in front of the other. You just do it. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to.
Is it kind of a like blank spot in your brain, or do you remember
Yes.
it? It's
Yeah,
you probably blacked it out almost.
I remember the fear. I remember the fatigue. I remember being so worried about my children because that's the first thing you think about, of course, is how are they dealing with it. And I had a wonderful doctor. In fact, the doctor that found my cancer in San Francisco, who I still see and am still in touch with. And she called me and said, you need to get your children in therapy. And I said, my children are doing fine, because she about my husband's cancer. She said, no, you're not listening to me. You need to put your children in therapy. And she called me every week and said, have you got your children in therapy yet?
She sounds remarkable. Wow.
He is remarkable, incredibly remarkable. And we got a therapist. And it's interesting, many children think they've caused the cancer or they're to blame for the cancer. Whatever, children don't. I mean, my kids were so little. My daughter was in kindergarten. I think my son was in third grade. They didn't know how to process it. And it's one of the best decisions I ever made was in terms of getting some family counseling. But it was because of this doctor who said, you don't understand. And when you're putting one foot in front of the other, there's only so many things you can deal with. So,
yeah.
And I didn't have I didn't have a lot of people up here.
Well, I was going to ask that. Did you have a community to surround yourself with? You're brand new.
The school, my children went to Epiphany School and the school was fantastic. And people, delivered meals to us and they did so many wonderful, wonderful things. So, I mean, we were very, very, very lucky.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Wonderful community.
When you look back on that chapter, the whole drugstore chapter, what words would you use to describe it as far as the pride? And then also like, what are you missing the most from that time?
What I miss the most is working with a team and developing a team. And like I said, I had an amazing team, every single person. And they've just gone on to these great careers and they're just so talented. And I miss that. I mean, the collaboration we really ran the company together and the turnaround is very hard. And we were competing against Amazon. That is not for the faint of heart. That's very hard. And we sold the company to Walgreens in about 2011, 2012. And so we got a good outcome. But the turnaround was really, I always tell people, taking a company from this to this is very hard. But taking a company from this to this, momentum can move against you, and just turning that momentum around and turning around a company, I think it's one of the hardest things you'll do in your career. So I'm very proud of what we accomplished. And, I miss the team. I really do. And I miss an operating job. It took me a while. After I left, we decided to stay in Seattle. I wanted a little more flexibility, and I'd already done a lot of board work and I really enjoyed it. So I decided
but your board work, Dawn, is next level. Like, I think it's some of the most impressive companies are so high profile.
But I was so lucky, Shauna. I mean, and I do mean that. I mean, I think everybody's career has some luck in it, and mine definitely did. And you have to I'm not saying I didn't do anything. You have to take advantage of the opportunities you have. But I was a woman who understood the internet and who had gotten a ton of visibility for the internet. There were very few other women who had the kind of visibility I had or the kind of experience I had with the internet.
But how do you feel about that sentence, though, with the woman part? Do you want the job to be because you were a woman or because you were just really freaking good at understanding the internet?
I think it was both. I mean, I didn't mind the fact, there were no women. Most of the time I was the only woman, although Meg Whitman had called me to try to recruit me. Remember when eBay was early, they really had a lot of technical problems. And I had already run, a system that had done a high volume of internet activity. And I didn't want to leave Schwab. And she ended up hiring Maynard Webb, who is head and shoulders above me and was fantastic and wonderful. And then I ended up going on the board. And like I said, she was an amazing mentor. And so I think those early opportunities were I was lucky. And the first board I went on was Times Mirror, the LA Times. And that was because there was a colleague at Schwab who she had been a CEO of a bank in Texas. And so she was already connected in with the CEOs and she had been on a board, and a headhunter called her and said, who do you know who understands the internet, but is not so technical that they can't, communicate with other people? And she recommended me and I ended up getting on that board. So, but I had actually done a lot of network. I decided I wanted to go on boards because I felt like I'd been at Schwab so long. I needed to learn from other people. I had wonderful people around me that were very smart, but I wanted to experience other industries, other companies, other executives, and really wanted to go on an outside board. And so I networked and tried to do that for about 18 months to 2 years. It didn't happen overnight, But that was my first experience. And then once you get on your first board, it is easier to get on other ones. And because if somebody went looking for a female potential board member that had board experience, that understood the internet, that had some visibility, I mean, like I said, I was lucky. There weren't a lot of them.
Well, there's lots of boards that you've been on, and I'm sure there's some that you've turned down. How do you decide? Is there a certain period that it must kind of pass as far as vetting the opportunities?
I think I made some mistakes. I think I'm a much better board member I am now than I was then. I didn't really, first of all, the time, and I'm not going to name companies, but there's two boards in particular that I went on, and I was really pushed to go on, and I did, and I shouldn't have, because it was around when my husband was sick and was getting better, and I had two young children. I was running drugstore, and it was a really big mistake because I was not a good board member. I couldn't focus. I just didn't have the energy and the time, and so I should not have gone on those. So I think and once again, I don't know. I hear other women say this. You feel like, well, if I don't do this, nobody's ever going to ask me again. Like, I have to take advantage of this because I'm never going to get another opportunity. And I think you can get in that mindset. And I was very much in that mindset. And then after a while, part of it is you feel, oh my gosh, for womankind, I got to do this because I'm one of the few women on boards, and you feel like this sense of responsibility. I felt that at drugstore, actually, which was, I can't mess this up. There's so few women that are CEOs, and drugstore was kind of a tech company. So few women, female tech companies. Oh my God, I can't mess this up. I'm letting womenkind down if I mess it up.
Yeah.
Pressure on yourself.
It is a lot of pressure. Is there anything that connects these boards? If there's like, this is the thread that connects the kind of boards that I'm drawn to.
I like retail businesses. I have experience like from Schwab and from drugstore, but I'm not just, many headhunters will call me and say, so what industry do you like? I like lots of industries. And I think learning, first of all, a lot of us, as a board member, you're a pattern recognizer, don't you? And there are patterns. There are patterns about growth. There are patterns about transformation. There are patterns about kind of maturity of businesses that go from industry to industry. So I think part of what you do as a board member is you're a pattern recognizer. You also synthesize a large amount of information. And I was pretty good at that. So it wasn't so much the industry. Now, I do like direct-to-consumer businesses, but I'm on some B2B boards as well. So I kind of like both. And I like learning about different industries. I would say, especially now as I've gotten older and I'm doing a portfolio and I've had lots of opportunities, I look at the CEO. You should never go on a board where you don't believe in the CEO, you don't believe in their ethics. I want to have interesting, smart people on the board with interesting strategic problems in the company. And companies that are either going through transformation or trying to leverage technology, those are obviously particularly interesting to me. And I love the portfolio because you get to think about different industries and you get to learn about different industries, which has been great.
And what do you read to stay informed and to stay kind of innovative and ahead of the curve?
Oh, it's so hard. Don't you think? I mean, I don't know that there's any one thing,
Sometimes I just look at Flipboard and I put the subject, and then Flipboard just sends articles on that one subject, and then it's across the board, like every kind of media coverage.
I read the Wall Street Journal, I'll
The
tell
Economist.
you, just as an aside, I'll tell you an interesting story. When I was at, even though my husband stopped working, we definitely were partners. And when I first had my son and I went back to work, and, you remember this when your kids are little, it's very hard. And in the morning, I would be drying my hair, washing my hair, drying my hair, and getting ready for work. And my husband would bring our son in, let him either, when he was really little, sit there when they don't do much or crawl around. And he'd bring me a cup of coffee and he'd read me the paper because I didn't have time to do it. And he didn't want me to walk into work like not knowing what was going on in the world.
Oh, he sounds amazing.
So he was like he was like a human clipping service.
Yeah, it's like Cliff Notes.
Well, here's the stories today. I mean, I've never had a clipping service as good as he was at that point.
That's incredible. I loved reading this thing that said that where you shared that in your Walmart interview for the board, that someone asked you if you had enough confidence to not talk.
Yes. It's the best question I've ever been asked. And that was Rob Walton, who said to me, do you have enough confidence to not talk in a board meeting? And I do. There's board meetings where I look back and think I talk too much. I mean, I really, I critique my own performance on boards. And I think, like I said, I've gotten better. I understand more about the governance of boards. I understand more about the committees and what they do. And I think that's just experience, right? It's like experience on a job, experience on boards. And I'm now chairman of committees and things, so I've really been able to kind of grow my own abilities as a board member, which has been really interesting for me.
Yeah, I've not been on publicly traded boards, but I've been on some boards, and oftentimes I don't know if it's talking too much, but I will ask a question that in my mind is like the dumb question. And later people will be so grateful that
I
I
know, it's
asked
the
it because
question
they'll be like,
everybody's
I was
wanting to
thinking
ask.
that, but I didn't feel safe to ask it. And I'm like, I'm so fine not being the smartest person in the room and asking questions. First, I don't know what it is. I don't know if that's the female thing. I don't know if it's just my personality, but I'm so fine raising my hand and saying, time out. I'm totally lost. Start over.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
fine
know.
for
I
me.
don't know if that's a female thing or not, but I agree with you. It's interesting. And people say, have you been talked over in board meetings? I have. And in fact, there was one board that I was on. But I also think you have to take responsibility, which is sometimes if I'm talked over or somebody doesn't pick up on my idea, I have to ask myself, was I effective in my communication? Like, is there a way I should have presented my idea differently? And I'm not saying I blame myself, but I think you have to be reflective of your own performance, right? If people aren't taking your ideas, is it that there's dynamics in the room that are working against you, or are you not being an effective communicator?
Or
And
is it a shitty
or
idea?
what'd you say?
Or is it a shitty idea?
Or is it a shitty idea? There you go. Is it a shitty idea? That's right.
You
Which
never know.
many
That's
times we
funny.
have. And I
Yeah.
was on one board where I was getting interrupted and talked over a lot. And I was going through this kind of soul searching of, oh gosh. And one of my male board colleagues on the board came to me after a board meeting and said, you realize you're being interrupted and talked over all the time, don't you? And he said, I've noticed it. And I'm really sorry I haven't spoken up yet, but I'm going to speak up more and help you. Yep. So there are amazing men on boards. I mean, anybody, you really have to understand
Love
there's
that.
so many amazing colleagues that I've
Yeah.
met.
Do you have a specific time or a memory when you feel like I actually influenced this meeting that resulted in an outcome that pushed the company in a meaningful way that I'm proud of?
There was one time I remember on the eBay board, and Schwab went through a tough time. We came out with internet trading. We were the first, but then remember how crowded the market got. You had E-Trade, you had Ameritrade, and we were charging a lot more for trades, and they came in under us, significantly under us. And so our margins shrunk very, very rapidly. And that's a hard thing to react to. And because there was a lot of room, like we had a branch network, we had a lot of cost structure that the pure internet, trading companies did not have. So there was a difference, obviously,
They
in
could
the cost
undercut you
structure.
easily. Yeah, for sure.
And early on in eBay, they were so successful. And, for a while, I remember they were raising their take rate, raising some of their costs to their community. And I remember saying to Meg, you're gonna leave yourself open to someone coming in under you. Like, be really careful about doing that. I've just been through that at Schwab. Be really careful about that. And Meg is an amazing businesswoman. Like, I can't say that I gave her an idea or I kept her from making a mistake. I would never say that. She is so incredible and so much smarter than I am. But I do remember she said, you made me think when you made that point. So that's one that sticks in my mind, partially because it's Meg and because I admire her so much.
Yeah. And yeah, that's got to feel like a compliment. So you definitely had a front row seat to all these different industries, so many big shifts across technology. It would be crazy for me not to bring up AI. Do
And
you
AI is
think
like
that this
nothing I've
is,
ever seen.
yeah, me
isn't
too.
it?
I'm like, are we going to,
just
it's crazy town. Do you think that do you see it more as a risk that boards need to manage or as an opportunity that we all need to lean into? And if so, like how?
I think it's both. And what's interesting is I remember being on a panel very early on in the early online trading days of Schwab, and somebody said to us then, and keep in mind, you could make a hotel reservation, you could do a trade, you couldn't do much else on the internet. And somebody said, when we look back in the internet revolution, how far along are we right now? And there were people on the panel who said like 50%, 70%. And I remember John Doerr was on the panel and he said, I said 5% and he said 2%. Of course, he was more right than I was, but I just didn't know what it was going to look like. But I thought there's going to be so much. And I think what's happening with AI, makes that is like 1,000 times more.
It's crazy.
Do I worry about it? Yes. I mean, I look at what social media has done to a whole generation, and do I worry about that? Absolutely. And like I mentioned, my daughter's working for an AI company, and it's been helpful because she's really educated me a lot more about AI because I'm trying to learn it. One of the benefits of having children late in life is I have children in their 20s now who can really keep me connected to what's going on. But I'm learning as fast as I can. I'm trying to learn a lot about AI in education. Like maybe that has a real opportunity to really help, whether kids with learning differences or low income kids. And there are a lot of really smart people doing policy work and experimentation about AI in education. I'm racing as fast as I can to learn about that and keep up with it. But it's very hard to keep up with. And I tend to be an optimist. I tend to be a, glass half full person, but that doesn't mean I don't worry about the implications and the dislocations that will happen with AI and the mistakes that will be made. And we know from experience that a lot of tech companies, there's probably an academic name for this. I'll just tell you, I think about capitalism. I'm a capitalist, but I think about responsible capitalism, meaning got to care
Absolutely.
about your employees, your community, your world, et cetera.
Legacy of all of it. Yes.
And, there's a lot of people in tech, and it's not that they're bad people. They're just very focused on the innovation and the transformation, and damage can be done along the way. And I'm sure we will see that with AI. And so how do we keep just keep the transformations going and all the great innovations? I think we can have huge innovations in healthcare and curing diseases. And of course, I'd love to see more happen with cancer, but there's going to be downsides to it. I am not smart enough to know what those are yet. I'm trying to learn as fast as I can.
Yeah. Well, if you were, I don't even know. I don't think anybody can say that they absolutely have the answer. But I know that people come to you for mentorship, for advice, for career advice. What kind of advice are you giving these days that might be different than you gave even a year ago, based on all the new information that we're getting?
That's an interesting point. I always felt that college was a lot about learning how to learn, right? I mean, even if you went in computer science 10 years ago, look at everything's different. So you're not
Oh,
necessarily
yeah.
applying exactly what you learned. So I mean, a lot of it is about continuing to learn. I mean, that's not any different advice. I love mentoring and I do quite a bit of it with young entrepreneurs, just once again, paying it forward. I had so many people who helped me. I want to help others. And for people not in an entrepreneurial role, not in a startup, I talk a lot about risk taking, a lot about assuming good intentions with other people. I think that's one of the most important things. Like, you can take any comment, anything that happens in your career and decide the world's against you, or you can give people kind of the grace of the benefit of the doubt and try to figure out what's going on and how you can respond to it. I also think taking risks are important. And I have to say, as I look back on my career, I did take several risks, especially at Schwab, and I was too naive and young to even know they were huge risks. I mean, I look back and think, oh my God.
I know, you're like, how did I have the confidence to do that?
Yeah. And some of it was just lack of, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
And
Ignorance
so
is bliss, right?
I do think, taking risks are important, especially if you're not in an entrepreneurial type and you're not in a startup. But I don't know. I mean, part of the advice is different, right? You've got to, and especially if you have a company that's 4 or 5 years old, you're going to be competing against native AI companies that are going to use AI for everything in the company. And they're going to be able to do things with 3 people that you've got 20 people doing. And so that's a big deal. And you really have to pay attention to that. And you really have to feel, and you need to go hire young. The way internet trading happened at Schwab, I had a group of, I don't remember, 5 or 6 people, super smart, but the ones who are like sharp elbows, had really good ideas, maybe didn't get along with everybody, a little arrogant, and they were the ones that came up with internet trading. And so I think having those people around, hiring those young native, those kids who have been using AI for years is a wonderful idea. You really have to embrace that.
What's crazy, because this is I don't even want to know. I mean, you and I keep joking about dating ourselves, but this is my 30-something year in recruiting. And it's been kind of like steady as she goes, pre-internet and then internet and now AI and everything changing. And so much of what I'm consulting clients on is culture and, making sure that they have inclusive environments. And now everyone's just focused on profitability and like how to do it with less people. And what are the implications on society on that? And just the economy, just all of it. It's gotten really, it's really changed a lot in this last year. Big time.
It must be hard for you as well. And the thing is, where will AI replace things and where won't it? I'm on one of the boards I'm on, they own Center Guitar, and we're talking a lot about music. And, I spent a lot of money on tickets to go see Paul Simon. I think there's still something about seeing somebody in person, the creativity of individuals. I think that's going to be permanent, survive. I mean, I do think that, obviously AI is going to change music like it changes all other industries, but there are things, creative aspects of people that make a big difference that will continue.
Huge difference. The kinds of things I'm telling like younger people about is thinking how to spending time, understanding how to think critically, and also doubling down on relationship building, because I'm getting probably triple the amount of inbound cold calls and marketing calls and, hey, do you want me to sell your company? And I mean, it's just my inbox is flooded and
Wow.
it's just noise right now because it's all being done by AI. And then on top of it, I'm getting quadruple the amount of resumes coming in and they've all been designed using AI. So then hiring managers are having a very difficult time deciphering between somebody who's done the job and who can do the job versus somebody who's created a fake resume using AI.
Isn't that
So it's just
interesting? I
this
didn't even
whole
think about
disconnect
that.
where it's actually increased the business because they need a human in between to vet the person and make sure that it's an actual person. It's
Yeah,
crazy town, Dawn. It's literally a
I
nutty
never
time
thought
right
of that,
now.
Shauna. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing.
There's really, I think it was like a period where everybody was in this frenzy of AI, and now it's still there. But the general sentiment is anybody who's not using AI is going to be threatened by their competitor who is using AI.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily that every single job is going to be replaced by AI. It's just if you're not engaged and leaning into it, you're behind people who are. And we're definitely incorporating it. We're implementing it. We have an AI engineer on staff. Like we're into it, but our clients really appreciate more than ever the relationship part and the actual human part.
Good. I think that's really good input. I think that's a good insight. I do think relationships matter, but I mean, we're not going to put the genie back in the bottle. AI is here.
Oh, no. Yes, absolutely. So I am curious, like you personally, how do you feel successful is my first question. And my second question is, how has that changed? Like how you define success now?
Oh, success now? I mean, honestly, I think my most important job in the world is as a mother. So hoping my children are happy and healthy and, find love and things that they love to do. That's the most important for me. And my children are in their 20s and they're going through that process right now, right? That's when you do that in your 20s. So I think that's the most important thing in terms of feeling successful. I don't know whether I feel successful or not. Am I proud of the things I've accomplished? Of course I am. But I also look back and see mistakes I made or things I could have done differently and I think I just want to continue to learn and be involved. I love intellectual stimulation. I would be so bored if I didn't have the intellectual stimulation. And so maybe that's a good news that AI is here because we certainly have a lot of intellectual stimulation trying to keep up with that. But that's why I do what I do and just love learning about new businesses, learning new things, whether it's reading books about companies that are founded or whatever it is. It's just, I like the intellectual stimulation that I thrive on that. And so that's something I just want to keep going with. But I don't really stop to think, was I successful? Was I not successful? By some measures, I was successful, right? I mean, but I don't sit around thinking about that at all.
Yeah. Well, I've always been very impressed watching your career and I love having you on the podcast. I'm super excited to lean in more and learn more about Teach for America and some of the other ways that you're spending your time these days.
I'd love to we have an amazing executive director here. He's relatively new, been here a few years now, but he's done an amazing job. And his life is dedicated to the students of Washington, and he's a really remarkable person.
I would love to meet him and learn more. And anything that you're interested in, I'm like, count me in. I'll just be on your tail, following you around. You have to answer my final question, which is what fuels you?
So I think two things. One is my children, my family, definitely. That's, somebody asked me, I forget when it was, maybe 6 months ago, what thing are you most proud of? And absolutely, my children were the number one thing that I thought of. And then once again, just learning. I mean, we live in such an interesting time, don't we? I mean, we think about it. And I do think that things are not perfect for women, but they've come a long way. And I'm just excited for the opportunities that young women have. And, it gets easier every generation. And once again, do we have improvements? Of course we do. But the opportunities out there are very exciting, and watching young people grow in their careers and helping them and mentoring them, that really fuels me as well.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. If you'd like to check out past episodes to hear from more business leaders, go to fueltalent.com/podcast. And if you have a minute, please leave a review and rating on your favorite podcast app, or share this episode with a friend or colleague. Please share any feedback or interview suggestions for other guests by sending a message to podcast@fueltalent.com. I'm Shauna Swerland, and thanks again for listening.